Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of my favorite series. This time we're going to be tackling top 10 LGBTQ plus movies, and guess what? It's that month. It's Pride Month, and that means I've decided to create a list that garners to all of these individuals with different orientations, and I think this is a really exciting time to be alive because there's a lot of really great films coming out of these communities, and I think there's a lot of good representation of it, and there's some bad representation as well. So within this top 10, we're going to be tackling lesbian films, gay films, bi films, and even trans films as well. There's not a really healthy mix of everything. There are some movies where we're going to be tackling maybe gay men a little bit more often than we're going to be tackling any other. That's just the nature of the beast. So, as a straight man, this is something that's really tough for me because I really cannot speak of any of these experiences. However, I can speak for their stories and how well they compelled me to listen, and that's what matters the most to all of these stories. So, without further ado, let's actually just get to my top 10. So, starting off with number 10, we're actually talking about a polyamorous relationship. In fact, I even talked about this film a couple years back on the channel when I used to do movie reviews all the time, and that is Professor Marston and the Wonder Women. Now, this is a polyamorous relationship about the creator of Wonder Woman, and so you got this main character right here, Professor Marston, who has a wife and also falls in love with another woman, and so this relationship, it blossoms and is kind of a little bit Hollywoodized. I even mentioned that in my review. That's something about this movie that would be my only quarrel with the film, is that I know there are some polyamorous relationships that would work, but for the most part, when I think about the logistics of it, I just feel like there's always going to be one partner who's not going to really be happy with spending a little bit more time with the other partner, but those exist as well. There are relationships that exist that actually really works well in harmony like that. But Professor Marsden and the Wonder Woman, I actually thought this was a pretty interesting film. I actually really enjoyed a lot of the hedonistic kind of tendencies of this film, and I actually love how they flesh out what they, the time period that they are writing this in is like, the early part of the 19th century where this was not at all okay, and then he kind of snuck it into Wonder Woman and this feminist icon that really just existed. And I think that's really, really interesting and really fascinating and really cool to see this side of the creator of Wonder Woman, because you wouldn't expect this at all, and honestly I had no idea who the creator was of Wonder Woman and the backstory behind it. And so this is a really cool biopic. I thought it was really, really well done. Obviously my only quarrel is how realistic that polyamorous relationship was. Did it just show us most of the good parts, or there are some bad parts that it didn't show us? I don't know. But that's my number 10 pick. It's also directed by a woman, Angela Robinson. This came out in 2017. I thought this was a really, really great pick. So moving right along to number 9, this is going to be relatively low on my list. However, I know a lot of people probably will think this is a higher film. This is Gus Van Sant's My Own Private Idaho. This is starring River Phoenix, and of course you got that beautiful man right there, Keanu Reeves, who's just riding the back of the John Wick series and just having a good time. He's a good guy. But this movie is really interesting and really fascinating to me because it's Gus Van Sant, who's more or less known for Good Will Hunting. But this film really tackles the relationship between two men who are friends, who are loners, who are on the road a lot, and eventually they're trying to, it's a sexual discovery story, and that's what's so fascinating about this story. So I need to watch this movie again because I've seen it once, but it definitely stuck with me because it was a movie, especially the campfire scene, where you have River Phoenix kind of coming out in a way that he does not feel very comfortable. And I think that's really interesting and really fascinating to see unfold, trying to describe himself and his experiences with his troubled past, how hard it is to come clean and tell somebody else that you really care for them in a way that you could expect either option of hurting somebody or loving someone back in return. And just an excellent addition to the genre. So, check out My Own Private Idaho. I need to see it again. It's a really great film. Let's move on to number 8. Alright, moving on to number 8, to probably the most critically acclaimed, one of the most critically acclaimed gay cowboy films, is Brokeback Mountain. Now this movie is directed by Ang Lee, and this came out in 2005, and this movie is with, of course, the late Heath Ledger, and we also have Jake Gyllenhaal. You have two men, a ranch hand and a cowboy, who in the 1960s, where this is totally not okay, have their wives, and they go on a camping trip, and they kind of just sexually discover themselves. And that's something that is really interesting, because most people probably know what Brokeback Mountain is, and most people there's a butt-in joke of this movie, but it's actually a pretty great film, and Ang Lee did a really great job of directing this. If you haven't seen it, this movie has some twists and turns to it, and I think it's really worthy of checking out, because there's really great performances, especially by Jake Gyllenhaal and Heath Ledger, of course. Another additional thing I want to mention is the wives in this movie. Michelle Williams and like even Anne Hathaway are really understated, but like a really potent element to this love story. And this really brings out the characteristics of each of these men, and I think that is what really drives a lot of their actions and inactions as well. So check out Brokeback Mountain if you haven't seen it. If you have, good for you. Alright, moving from Brokeback Mountain, we are moving to a trans film actually directed by Sean Baker, which is a gorgeous film. Sean Baker directed the Florida Project a couple years back, but the film that he directed before this in 2015 was Tangerine. Now this movie is about two sex workers, and both of them cross-dress. I believe both of them are transgender, I believe if not one of them. And it really just is a really realistic and grimy kind of story. It's a story that really is not for the faint of heart. It's not super comfortable, and there's a lot of drugs, sex, and a lot of language in this, and there's just a lot of things that are going on in this particular story. And it's not really particularly linear. It's just kind of a day or two in the lives of these individuals, and that's what's so interesting and fascinating. And honestly, it is a site that most of us don't really pay attention to. I talked actually a little bit about Tangerine on the weekend six-pack, and so I had a lot of my more of my thoughts more fresh then, but Tangerine was just an exploration of something that I find probably uncomfortable, but at the same time I think is really fascinating to watch, because it's something that you will never see unless you understand their worldview. And so Tangerine is a great film. Sean Baker does fantastic work, and he also does a lot of stuff in Florida. I think he likes Florida. And he likes to deal with colors too, Sean. So anyway, this movie is great, Tangerine. If you haven't seen it, check it out. It's really fantastic. Alright, the next movie I'm going to talk about, I don't have physically. I wish I did, because it's a good movie. I saw this I saw this last year, actually. It is The Miseducation of Cameron Post. This is about a woman who went to a gay conversion camp. So this woman is a lesbian, and she had her first lesbian encounter, and her parents overreacted, like insanely, and sent her to this camp. And these are conversion camps that actually exist, and they still exist. In fact, Boy Erased actually tackled this the same time, and actually I think Miseducation really dealt with it a lot better, and in my opinion, because I feel like it was a little bit more realistic and less glamorized in the way that Boy Erased made it out to be. Even though Boy Erased had some memorable moments, and I thought some really good performances, but for the most part, Miseducation is a little bit better. Chloe Grace Moretz plays Cameron Post, and she is just fantastic in this film. And you can really tell how uncomfortable everybody at this camp is. Some of the people are trying to just do exactly what their parents tell them, what the counselors tell them. Some of them run away. There's just a lot of really crazy moments in this movie, and it makes you feel very uncomfortable. And as a movie that I actually also talked about last year when I did one of my last movie reviews, I think it's something that you should definitely check out. Miseducation of Cameron Post was a movie that really stuck with me, and it still sticks with me now, of how awful people can be to other people who just want to live the life that they want to live, and are just kind of coming of age and trying to figure out themselves. And I think that's something that movie really did show and shine a light on, the unfortunate mishappenings of what happens with that. So check out Miseducation. It's not a really fun watch, but it's a good movie, and it actually has reminiscent elements of My Own Private Idaho. At least certain moments in my mind come to mind. So anyway, it's a good movie. Check it out. Let's move on from there to number 5. Number 5 might be the most iconic movie on the entire list, because it's something that kind of crosses all these genres a little bit. but also just kind of flirts with him. And that's Rocky Picture Horror Show. Now this is a movie I actually did not check out until a couple years ago. I think last year maybe, at the very beginning. I hadn't seen it. In fact, I even have a story with this. My dad, when he used to be a film chair at the university, he didn't finish the university, but he definitely headed that. One year in like the early 80s, he brought this movie to campus and screened it. And the funny thing about that is everybody was just smoking weed and honestly just cigarettes and honestly being rowdy, and then he got in huge trouble for it, and I thought that was really funny when he told me that. But Rocky Picture Horror Show, I mean, look at this. Tim Curry is this iconic man. This is a really crazy story. If you don't know Rocky Picture Horror Show, it's a mix between a musical, a horror, fantasy, a lot of sexual tension, some sci-fi elements. It's got some Frankenstein elements to it, which I think is really cool. But this is a movie I've only really seen once, like I said, and it's really stuck with me because honestly I wasn't the biggest fan of it when I first saw it, nor did I really care about the fervor behind it, because I know a lot of people who are watching it either live or in some kind of other capacity where they really know every reference to everything and every song, and I'm not one of those people who does. I don't really know every single thing about this movie. But I do love Tim Curry's performance, and I really do enjoy a lot of the aspects of this film. I'm actually lightening up a little to it, and that's probably why it made on this list, and it beats the other movies before it because it's just so damn enjoyable and fun and quirky and crazy and just really zany, and it's definitely belonging on this list because it opened the doors for a culture. It came out in 1975, and so it's a little bit of revelatory and a little bit liberating, this film, and I think it kind of just lay the blueprints on a lot of these issues. And so Rocky Picture Horror Show is going to make an appearance on this list somehow. Let's move on from there to number 4. Alright, moving on to number 4 is actually probably the most generic movie on the list, but it's a really good, feel-good movie, and it really reminds me of a John Hughes film, and that's why I love it so much, and that is Love, Simon. This came out last year, and this movie is about a character, Simon, coming out to his friends in high school and everybody in general, and he definitely reminds me of a couple of my friends who are very quiet and very reserved to themselves, who are also gay, but they're out. But I remember them telling me stories when we watched this movie that it reminds them of what they had to go through in high school and how insane it had to be. So, Love, Simon. This movie is just a really fun coming-of-age movie. It's got a really serious and really lighthearted tone to it. It's got a nice, really balancing act to it. It's a little Hollywoodized, which is probably why I'm saying it's the most generic thing on the list. It's definitely not everyone's experience, and there's a lot of moments to where there's some acceptance parts that I don't know if it's entirely true with every particular place. It just depends on where you live, right? And who are the people you are around. But it's definitely a story that you could just probably, out of all the movies that I'm going to probably be talking about, just pop this in at any moment and kind of just enjoy it in the background or just be active with it. It's just a fun movie. It's a feel-good movie, and it really is an accepting movie. And that's what this is all about, and that's what this list is all about, is just acceptance. So Love, Simon, that's my number 4 pick. It's a really fun one. I hope you have checked it out before. It's a good time. So let's moving on from there to number 3. Number 3 is probably the most sexual because it's French. And you can probably see where I'm going with this. It's a Criterion as well, and it's a 3-hour-long movie, and that is Blue is the Warmest Color. Now this movie, I saw this last year actually for the first time. I've been meaning to watch this movie for quite some time. It's about two women, a lesbian couple, who have like the rise and fall of a relationship and a sexual awakening for one in particular. I just think it's really fascinating how this film just is very raw and real. And when I mean that, I mean like in the very physical sense and also in the emotional, relational context. It's a really, really well-made film with beautiful colors, beautiful acting. Holy shit. The acting from these actresses are just phenomenal. I was just really thrilled how natural their chemistry was, and I just think that was really, really fascinating and really interesting to watch because it's just, like I said, it's that rise and fall of that relationship, and that's something that is ultimately human. In the context of this particular film, is between two women, and that is really interesting, and I think that is something that, you don't really see it often, because like most of the things that I've mentioned on this list are actually of men, and that's perfectly fine, but I haven't really seen very many films deal with two women characters who love each other in a way that these two love each other. So that's something that's, I think, is really fascinating and really, really well done. And I won't even attempt to mention the French director's name. I'm going to put it right here because I can't pronounce that. I can't pronounce that. This came out in 2013, by the way. So let's actually move on from Blue is the Warmest Color to my number 2 pick. A movie that won an Oscar a couple years back. What is that movie that won the Oscar a couple years back? That's Moonlight. And I hate that I have this little thing here. I can probably go get some Goo Gone. I could probably get it off. I know. But this is Moonlight. This is directed by Barry Jenkins. This is his first film that he made. Holy shit, what a gorgeous film. And also what a beautiful story. What a really tragic story as well. This gay black man, and all of the different actors who play him. There's 3 different actors who play the same character in different times periods of his life. Mahershala Ali, he's so fantastic in this movie, as like a father figure in early life. But anyway, I'm not going to really talk about what the movie, the plot of the film is. But this movie is gorgeous. It just tells the story of a young black man's sexual awakening and the experiences throughout his entire life of different moments of pure joy and pure anger and frustration. And it's something that is really visceral and super fascinating to watch unfold. And I think Barry Jenkins just has a really great touch to filmmaking that is just very apparent with It Feels Like We Could Talk. I love that movie. I really wish that won the Oscar last year. I think that deserved the Oscar over freaking Green Book. But anyway, that's a different story for a different time. But yeah, no, this movie is fantastic. And Moonlight, I actually predicted this back when the Oscars occurred. I thought this movie was going to win, and then I noticed La La Land won, and I'm like, La La Land was fun. And then they switched it on you because Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway messed it up. Well, at least Warren did. But anyway, like I said, Moonlight is a great film. It's a fantastic film, especially about a minority within a minority that really doesn't get shown. And I think that's something that's super fascinating and also super important. So let's move on to my number 1 pick. A movie that I've seen probably about 7 or 8 times, and it makes me cry every fucking time. And that movie is Luca Guadagnino's Call Me By Your Name. When I say Luca Guadagnino, he's the director. It's based on a book. I can't remember who the book author is. I own the book. At least actually it's Doug's book. Do you remember Doug, Mr. Smith? He was on my old podcast. Doug, if you're watching this, I'm sorry. I'm going to give that book back to you soon. Great book. Fantastic. I think it's Ackles Ackerman or something like that. Anyway, Call Me By Your Name. Timothy Chalamet, Armie Hammer. This movie is phenomenal. This is about a young summer romance in the middle of Italy in this small town and in this little villa. This story is about Armie Hammer coming as a young scholar coming over to under the tutelage of Michael Stahlberg, who is Elio's father. Fantastic actor and fantastic father as well. But he's coming to study under him, and he notices Timothy Chalamet, and just there's nice flirtations with each other, and there's some young summer love between some women, and there's a lot of questioning, and it's just such a fantastic movie with such an amazing score. Sufjan Stevens does a really great job scoring the film a little bit. It has some songs in it, and I don't know, it's just one of those movies that really just makes me cry every single time, and it shows me the aspect of what love is and what love means to anybody, and that means everybody. Love is the biggest factor between all of these LGBTQ+ films that I'm talking about. Now, there are some movies that are a little bit harder to swallow than this one in particular. There are some bittersweet films. There are some really fantastic, really great, heartwarming films like Love, Simon. There's some really crushing films like this one in particular. But just in general, these are all really great films. And so I want to thank you so much for checking out my top 10, my favorite series. This time we were talking about LGBTQ+ films. It was a fun time making this video. I had a really hard time too because I had not seen a lot of the films I had been looking up, but you know what? Since I saw Rocketman the other day, I thought this would be a good time to do it. It's also Pride Month, so why not? So thank you all for checking this video out. Like, comment down below, share this video, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and I'll see you next time. I'm not jonesing around.